Welcome to Canyon Lake Unfiltered, where we talk about what's really going on around the lake. No fluff, no filters. From local stories and community issues to the people that make Canyon Lake what it is. This is real talk from right here at home.
Welcome back to Canyon Lake Unfiltered, where we talk with the people who are shaping our community and the future of the Texas Hill Country. Today, I'm joined by Merrie Fox, who is a candidate for Texas House District 73. Merrie has deep roots in our community. She moved to Canyon Lake as a teenager in 1982, grew up here, raised her family here, and spent 31 years serving local students and families in public education before retiring as a school principal. Today, she serves as the executive director of Circle Arts Theater in New Braunfels. Now she's taking that experience into the political arena, running to represent District 73 in the Texas House of Representatives. Her campaign focuses on our water resources, supporting public education, and addressing the unique needs of the communities she hopes to represent. Whether you're already familiar with Merrie, you're still deciding who to support, or you're simply interested in hearing directly from someone asking for your vote, today's conversation is a chance to get to know the person behind the campaign. Merrie, welcome to Canyon Lake Unfiltered.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. So, for those who may not know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, like you mentioned, I moved over to the Canyon Lake area from Houston in 1982. And so I've been here for about 45 years and went to Mountain Valley just in Sattler and had a great experience there. That's back when it was a K-8 school and open classrooms. That concept was kind of in style. And so it was very different from what it is now. But ended up going to Smithson Valley High School back when Smithson Valley served everybody from Borgfeld in Bexar County all the way over to Fisher and from New Braunfels almost to Blanco, edge of New Braunfels. So I had friends across the district and at least in Comal County and anyway, had a great experience. And from there went to Southwest Texas State at the time and got a bachelor's in education and became a teacher. It was the one thing I had wanted to do all of my life. And later on, and loved that career. And later on, pursued my PhD and became a school principal. And I've raised a family here. I'm married, have two kids, two little French bulldogs who are needy and spoiled rotten. I currently work as the executive director at Circle Arts Theater. It's a great place. Come and see us sometime in New Braunfels. And so now I'm running for public office so that I can serve our communities.
Wow, that's a handful. So you moved to Canyon Lake in 1982.
Yeah.
What was Canyon Lake like back then, and what are some of your favorite memories growing up here?
Oh my gosh. So in 1982, there were about 39,000 people living in the entire Comal County. In comparison, now there are about 215,000 living in the county. So it was much smaller back then. And it was kind of a sleepy little town is how I would describe it. But it came up alive in the summertime. Of course, when we had tourists here. And I have such great memories about growing up at Canyon Lake. So moving to Canyon Lake in 1982, we had been coming up here as a family for years and years, and we camped down at Mountain Breeze down on River Road and loved that experience. And then we moved here in 82 because my dad had emphysema and we wanted to live in a place where the air was cleaner and there was more space, having come from the Houston area. And I loved Canyon Lake. And so growing up here as a teenager, I was 13, I guess, when we moved here, and we played. I played at Canyon Lake. We would go snorkeling. We would hunt for treasures. We'd do the same thing in the Guadalupe. And, after major holidays, tourists would come and go down the river and they would flip their tubes over the rocks. And dude, on Monday, we'd be in the river snorkeling for all the lost treasures that had dumped out of their tubes. And that was such a great memory. You just never knew what you were going to find. And my dad used to make paddles, like almost like ping pong paddles out of plywood of all things. And then he'd slack them. And then we'd use those to navigate in our tubes down the river. It was just a great time. As far as like growing up, I worked all around Canyon Lake. So I worked at a little not an Airbnb at that time, but it was like a little hotel at the Village West boat ramp. And so I cleaned rooms. I've been working since I was 14. I've worked hard. I'm at the little grocery store in Sattler. I worked at what was a Dairy Queen over on the north side of the lake that's now a Mexican food restaurant. I was a lifeguard at Joint Base San Antonio, Fort Sam,
Mm.
on Potter's Creek. I was a waitress. That was probably one of the hardest jobs. It was a Mexican food restaurant at the time. It's where I think it's called Granny D's is now.
Yeah. Okay.
And so just a lot of experiences growing up around the lake, just great memories.
Wow. So
Yeah,
yeah, you're rooted here in Canyon Lake. I like
I
it.
am indeed.
Yeah. So you spent 31 years in public education and retired
Yeah.
as a school principal, right?
Yep.
So what first inspired you to become an educator?
I wish I had a great moment in time when that just hit me, but I don't. I feel like it's more of a calling. I just always knew that I wanted to be a teacher. In fact, when I was younger, I have a younger brother who's 13 months younger than me, and I used to play school with him, much to his chagrin, because I would sit him down and with my stuffed animals, and we'd take roll, and then I would present lessons and make him do work, which of course he did not want to do. I would fail him and, tell him he needed to do better in school. But it was just always a thing for me. I just always knew I wanted to be a teacher.
Hmm, interesting.
Hmm.
Now, looking back over those 3 decades, what are you most proud of?
The schools that I led ranked very high on the different accountability systems over the years, exemplary or rated A or whatever the accountability system was at that time. And I led a school that created a Spanish immersion program. I led the initiative to implement social emotional learning at the middle school level, all big things as far as the school administrator is concerned. And I'm very proud of those things. But I think what I am most proud of is the culture that I built at each of those schools. I used to keep a rainy day, I called it my rainy day file. And I would get notes from staff members or from kiddos, and I would put it in there. And so on those rainy days, on the days when I'm like, what am I doing? And am I doing the right thing? Am I where I'm supposed to be? I would open that file and look at those notes and think, I am at the right place. Being a principal for me was never about the title or the so-called power. It was about being in a position where I could make decisions for kids and for staff members and sometimes for families that helped them. And so I am most proud of the connections that I made with people along the way.
Awesome. So after retiring from education, most people slow down. Instead, you decided to run for the Texas House.
I did.
Why? Why do you want to do that?
My heart is here. I grew up here. This is my home. And I believe that public service it's almost mandatory, I guess I'd say, because I
Yeah.
have the capacity, I have the time, I have the passion. How could I not run for office? And in a time when we are so politically divided collectively, I think it's so important to have leaders at the local level, state level, and the federal level who are willing to talk and provide input, but also to listen. And there were so many times when I was in education, particularly as a school principal, and there were laws that would come down, some good, some like no pass, no play. I think it was hard to implement, but it was a great law overall because our kids need to be academically successful before they're playing on the field or are in the gym.
Right.
And then there were some that were not so great. And I think about there was a law that came down and it was about having children, all students in a campus, practice exiting a bus in the case of an emergency. That sounds really smart, right? We want kids to be safe when they are traveling on buses. And even kids who get dropped off and picked up by parents, they're still on buses for field trips and games and things like that. So yes, we want them to be safe. At the same time, when that law was implemented at the campus level, you're talking about some, let's say, high schools with 3,500 students, and
Yeah.
every single one of them had to have not only the instruction, but then had to run through the drills on the bus. And so that was massive because we had to do that at a time when the buses weren't needed. We tried to do it at a time when we weren't taking away from instruction. I mean, it was just massive. And so I wanted to have input about these laws that were impacting us on the campus because I choose to believe that so many of those laws were put into place for the benefit of our schools and the people they serve, but it didn't always translate to the campus level the way that it was intended. And so I felt like if we meaning educators, could have some input about those things, then it would be a win-win. We could get laws in place that would help, and they would be able to be implemented at the campus level. But when I tried to meet with my representatives, it was difficult. It was difficult to get in, and often I couldn't. The one or two times that I did, it wasn't really a conversation. It was Kyle Biederman at the time in the House of Representatives, House District 73, I believe, and he told me all of the reasons, why public schools are not doing well and what we need to be doing instead. And I just thought, this is not a conversation. This is not what I came for, and that was frustrating to me, because
Right.
I think you have to listen to the people that you're serving. And then there were laws, Jeff, that came in that were so random. Like in, what was it, 2004? I had just become an assistant principal, and Susan Combs was the commissioner of ag commissioner, and her office implemented some nutritional guidelines and policies that we had to implement in the school. And one of those was parents and teachers cannot bring in cupcakes, pizza, kind of like junk food to a classroom or cafeteria or whatever. You can't do that. Like, okay, so we said no to that. Well, guess what? Grandparents and parents were really upset about that. And so I forget his name now, but one of the senators got an earful from his 13-year-old daughter about, why, Dad, can we not have cupcakes at birthday parties and whatever at school? And so then the law was amended to say, well, we're going to put restrictions on some foods, but as long as, the parents bring in, or grandparents or whomever, bring in snacks that are for a celebration, then that's okay. And so then the next year we're scrambling, just making sure that everybody's got it just seemed so random. And I just thought, it's not that I think I can do it better, but I do have a perspective about our schools, at least, and this community that I've grown to love. And so I think I would do well to speak for our communities.
And I think that's important, especially for education. I think a lot of times, like you said, these random laws that they make, they just don't realize the impact that it has on schools and
Yeah.
students and teachers,
Yes.
as well as leadership at the schools. So,
Right.
yeah, I think that's a very good point. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, was there a specific moment when you realized you wanted to run for elected office?
Actually, no, there was not. There was not a moment in time when I said, you know what, I think I'm going to do that. It was more of, I worked for 31 years, the last 20 as a campus administrator, and retired. I retired on a Friday. I went to work on a Monday as the executive director of Circle Arts Theater, because the idea was never to not work. It was just, I felt called to a different journey. I just didn't know what it was
Right.
going to be yet. And so I retired and went that route. And as time went on, 2 or 3 months, I got involved in the community. I've always volunteered, but I became more active in the political scene, in our community, city council and our commissioners courts, and just all the things. Really paying attention to what was happening. And a friend approached me and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about running for office?" And I said, "Absolutely not once, never." No, I like the mantra of, people are typically either stars in the sky or lights in the chamber. And I consider myself a light in the chamber. I like to do the work. I want to serve. I don't need the recognition or the title. So running for office was never on my radar. But at that point, when she and I were talking, I started thinking about, maybe this is my journey. Maybe this is the next step. I always thought being a school principal was my pinnacle. Like, I worked so hard to get there. I worked so hard to do well there. And I retired and I went, ta-da, I'm done. And then as I have really become more involved throughout our community, particularly politically, I've realized that was, being a school principal was just a great stepping stone to this, and to be able to serve our communities on a bigger scale.
Hmm. So, speaking of our communities, what makes District 73 special and why do you want to represent it?
Oh my gosh, our lakes I mean, this area is so beautiful. It's where I grew up. My heart is here. We talked a little bit about my memories growing up, and there's so many things, walking the top of the dam and, just all the things about HD 73, which includes all of Comal County, by the way, and half of Hayes County. So I don't have the eastern part with San Marcos, Kyle, or Buda, but I do have Wimberley and Dripping Springs out to Blanco, that rural area.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so having grown up here, like I said, I went to Smithson Valley. So I had friends who lived as far as toward Bear County on Borgfeld Road all the way to Fisher, so North Canyon Lake. And then my kids did Shakespeare in the summers in Wimberley. And then I have extended family in Dripping Springs. And so I believe this, I just HD 73 truly is my home. And
Okay.
I just think this area is a diverse area. We tend to think, so many people tend to think as House District 73 is a very rural, and it's not. It's rural, it's suburban, it's urban to some degree. We're getting there because of growth, and it would just be an honor to serve the community.
Right. Okay. So if someone asked you why you're the best person for the job, what would you tell them?
I'd say that my work as a school principal has really prepared me well for this position. So I've managed large budgets, hundreds of employees. I have worked with complex systems that have to come together in a certain way to make things work. I've worked on issues with competing interests. In schools, everybody pretty much wants the same thing, right? We want kids to feel loved and valued and safe, and we want them to get a good education. That is not as simple as it sounds, because sometimes parents have a certain way of seeing how that should be done, as do teachers, community members, our district office. And so while we are working toward one common goal, it's a multifaceted, complex issues sometimes. And so in having dealt with all of those things, I feel like that is the perfect stepping off point to serve this community. And I think something that sets me apart from my opponent truly is that I am not afraid to show up in rooms where people have differing opinions. In fact, I think it's a must. I think that good leaders want to seek out different ideas and different perspectives so that you can have all the voices at the table. That sounds so cliche, but it is true to have multiple perspectives when you're trying to decide how to move forward on really important things. So
I agree 100%. So let's change gears here for a little bit and talk about water.
Okay.
Water is one of the cornerstones of your campaign. Why has
Yes.
it become such an important issue for you?
It is an important issue for me because it is an important issue for our community. And what I have learned in researching and attending meetings and trainings and seeking out water experts is it is so complex. There are so many pieces to it. There's groundwater, surface water, there rainwater collection, and there are so many different entities with varying levels of authority about how water is managed. And so I have learned a lot. And one of the things, there are several concerns about water. So certainly with our massive growth and development, there is concern about how much water we're pulling up from aquifers, right? We need a sustainable, maintainable level of water to serve our homes and to serve our ranches and to serve our businesses that are already here, plus what we are accounting for in terms of moving in for growth. The other piece, though, about water is what happens to it after it's used. After it's pulled out of the ground, it's used, and then what happens to it? And I have become really entrenched in learning more and more about that. And for example, over on 306, there's a subdivision going in. It's Canyon Ranch, but a little part of Canyon Ranch is Juniper Ranch, right, off of 306.
Yep.
And it's the developer it's been platted for 1,500 homes on 400 acres, so about 4 homes per acre. And what happens when a developer comes in the county, not in an incorporated area, but out in the county, they have to have water from somewhere. So Juniper Ranch is going to get water from the Texas Water Company, which pulls water from the Trinity Aquifer and gets water directly from Canyon Lake. But when you're thinking about wastewater, what happens to that water after it's used? The developer will build a wastewater treatment plant. Great, the water's treated, and then that's where it gets tricky. Then it's discharged into tributaries and creeks that eventually flow to Canyon Lake. So in the in the instance of Juniper Ranch, that wastewater is going to be dumped into what they call an unnamed tributary that goes through Devil's Hollow in Mystic Shores on its way to Canyon Lake. And it's not the only subdivision that's doing that. All of these developments out in the county, I say all, most of the developments out in the county are doing the same thing. They build the wastewater treatment plant, they discharge the water, and it goes into Canyon Lake. So that in itself, when you discharge water into the tributaries, those tributaries go across people's properties.
Yep.
And so that causes concern for drinking water for livestock. Some of these ranchers will build berms to collect rainwater and so on so that livestock and wildlife have water to drink. But then when you think about the wastewater coming through that property, what is the water going to be like for those animals to drink? And then there's also the concern about the water going into Canyon Lake.
Yeah.
Now, thankfully, with all of the rain, which we are so blessed to have had, I read last night that Canyon Lake is about 92% full as of yesterday, I believe. And wow, that is tremendous, because I think we were down to about 56, 52, something like that percent full. So that's fantastic. The lake, as we all know, goes up and down. Right now it's 92%. Hopefully it will stay pretty close to that. But last 2 weeks ago, it was at 56%. And so when you think about all of this wastewater going into Canyon Lake, those nutrients stack over time. And if the lake is already low and that water's coming in, then what happens? What impact does that have on our communities?
Right.
And there's also the issue of how the wastewater is treated or at what level. So the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCEQ, easier, is in charge of mandating the levels for which the wastewater is treated. But I've learned that those levels are antiquated and they have to be updated, but the legislature holds that power. So back to TCEQ treating the water, the levels of nitrogen and phosphorus that are allowed to still be in the water can, as it comes down through those tributaries and into Canyon Lake, they can cause algae blooms, which are toxic then to the wildlife in the lake. And so there are just all kinds of issues as we deal with growth and development that we really need to be having conversations about. And they're hard conversations because it involves property rights, right of capture, all of these long-standing beliefs about how we manage our area, our water, our land, and so on. And they are tough conversations and tough issues that we need to work together to solve.
Yeah. I have had 2 people on my podcast that are advocates for clean water.
Yes.
And one of them is Janae Delaney.
Danae Delaney, I was wondering. She's fantastic.
And another one is Brent Wewell.
Yep, absolutely. Both so knowledgeable.
Yeah, they are. And I've learned a lot from them because I was more concerned about the water level, but after finding out there's so many wastewater treatment plants and that water is getting into the lake, whether we like it or not. For example, just this past week, all the amount of water that we got, amount of rain that we got, it filled up those tributaries. Well, what happens with that water that's in the tributary when it gets full? It flows into Canyon Lake or it flows into the Guadalupe or something. So it's going to get into it. And you mentioned the chemicals, that the antiquated levels that we have as far as TCEQ requirements go. But we have to think about forever chemicals and the things that they haven't even thought about yet.
And I think that's a great point. One of the things I didn't mention, but should be, is pharmaceuticals. Like the treatment levels and standards have not kept up with the amount of pharmaceuticals and the types of pharmaceuticals that we now have.
Yeah. Brown, he is big on the purple pipe. He's big on separating the sewage water from the fresh water. And I'm an advocate for that. I know it's going to be expensive, and I hope that we eventually get to that because there are lakes up north around Austin that are protected, and
absolutely.
For some reason, and that's one thing that I would ask you for if you are elected, to try to advocate for the protections that other lakes have for Canyon Lake, because it's such a needed resource, and if that resource goes away or if that resource gets polluted beyond use, then we're screwed,
Yeah,
basically.
absolutely. Because not only do these water sources serve our homes and our ranches, but also Comal County boasts a $1.3 billion industry on tourism, which is largely impacted by water. And
Yeah,
if we don't have clean, safe, usable water, surface level and underneath, it is not just it's a well-being issue and also an economic issue.
it is.
And I concur about both Brent and Danae. I've worked more with Danae. I just haven't run across Brent quite as often. Haven't spoken to him, but Danae and I have had several conversations, and I so appreciate the passion that she is putting forth to help Canyon Lake be more like the to get the protections that the lakes in Austin have. I think it's Chapter 311 protections.
Something like that.
Canyon Lake should absolutely have that. And the also the thing about purple pipe, completely agree. I think that should be mandated by the legislature, that developers have to put that in. And yes, it's expensive, but what's the cost if they don't? And
Exactly.
so, we have to weigh both of those things.
Yeah. I live on the south side of the lake. I live pretty
Hmm.
close to Cranes Mill Marina. And all of the houses in my housing development, they have
Yeah.
septic systems. So I'm kind of surprised that some of these other areas are building wastewater treatment plants and are discharging that water when some of the other areas have septic. I don't understand the reason why, but yeah, in any event, we definitely need to protect our water.
Well, I can speak to that kind of. I know to
Okay,
have a septic system, you have to have a certain amount of land. It's, I don't know,
right,
somewhere between 1 and 5 acres.
right.
But when a developer puts a home on 5 acres, they can't make nearly as much money as if they put 4 homes on an acre. And
That's
so when you have that higher density development, you have to have a wastewater treatment.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's continue here. How do we balance growth with protecting the natural beauty and resources that brought people here in the first place?
Absolutely. I truly think we have elected county officials, our commissioners,
Mm,
right, who don't have a whole lot of authority out here in the county because the legislature holds that authority, not just for Comal County, but for all 254 counties in the state. And I think that our elected officials who serve as the voice for communities need to have more authority, zoning authority, about when and where and how development happens throughout the county. That happens in municipalities.
yeah,
So city residents, of course, have city council members they elect and that speak for them. And if they don't like what's happening, they vote them out. It's not like that in the county. And I don't yet understand why, but it is the way it is. And so right now, a person could come and, they buy a beautiful home out in the hill country with, let's say, beautiful views, and whether they're in a subdivision or they're on a huge ranch or a lot of acreage. What they don't often know is that the ranch next to them could be sold and the developer can do anything they want with that property.
right.
So they could put in another beautiful neighborhood like the one that this person lives in. They could do a high density development. They could put apartments, they can put retail. An aggregate company could come in where they scrape the land to do, much needed road base. But is that what you want next to your neighborhood?
Right.
But since there's no control for our county commissioners to zone areas, I think I don't know. I've heard it say it's all about property rights. My opponent often talks about the importance of property rights, and I completely agree in that people deserve or should have the right to sell their land and to sell it for the highest amount possible. And then what happens after that is not about them. But I think about, what about the property rights of the people who are already there? And I
Right.
think I don't think county commissioners or anybody should have total control, but I think some level of zoning authority would help, because if I want to go and spend my savings, I'm buying my dream home, my forever home,
Hmm.
whatever, I want to know what the possibilities are for the land that's around me. And I think that's fair.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. So, speaking of the state level, what
Mhm.
specific policies would you like to see adopted in Austin?
Well, certainly I would like to see some legislation about giving some zoning authority to our county commissioners in all 254 counties. I think communities should get to have a greater amount of input or influence on development, when, where, how, and in accordance, because no one really wants a whole lot of development, really few people do, but I think communities and our elected officials should have more say so about when, where, and how development happens according to the natural resources that are available for incoming growth. I'd love to see policy that updates our TCEQ wastewater treatment standards to include higher or I guess lower levels of nitrogen and phosphorus, but also taking into account the pharmaceuticals and the other, kind of forever chemicals that we talked about. I'd like to see a responsibility placed on developers to install systems that reuse wastewater for irrigation, which is where a lot of our drinking water from the aquifer goes to irrigation, and it doesn't need to. I think those are some of the major ones that I'd like to see in terms of water.
I agree. I agree. Okay. Well, another one of your main subjects that you talk about is public education.
Yes.
And with your vast experience in public education, you wrote something on your guest questionnaire that caught my attention. You said public schools are not failing. Now, there is a lot of talk around the country of privatization and school
Yep.
vouchers and things like that. So it gives the thought that maybe public schools are failing. So, what do you mean when you say schools are not failing?
When I hear that public schools are failing, I wonder which public schools, because it's not public schools in Comal County. Comal ISD and New Braunfels ISD have outstanding campuses from elementary all the way to high school that excel academically, they excel sports, fine arts, and so on. Hayes County is the same way. The Wimberley Independent School District and Dripping Springs Independent School Districts are doing incredible things with their kids.
Great.
So when we say public schools are failing, which ones are we actually talking about? Well, we know they're talking about public schools that are in urban areas that serve kids who are socioeconomically disadvantaged. Primarily, those are where our schools are falling short of meeting that standardized testing level. Right? There's so many pieces to this. I'm trying to approach it from a linear perspective. So one point on that is that when we say public schools are failing, we know that not all schools are, but all schools face the consequences of that mantra. And public schools are failing has been said so many times that it's just become truth across the state and really across the nation, and which is so unreasonable and unfair. For one thing, we have Texas public, every state does it's unfair because each state is responsible for their educational system. Right. So as a nation, when we say our public schools are failing, which ones are we talking about? Because each state does it so differently, everything from funding to curriculum to testing and so on. When we are compared to national, at the national level, usually through a test, PISA, and it measures reading and math and so on, we are being compared to countries like Finland and Sweden and the Netherlands, where one, they have a single system of education. It's not all of these divisions. And two, and this is really important, their socioeconomic levels are so much lower than the United States as a nation. And that has bearing. So a minute ago, we were talking about the socioeconomic, the levels of poverty in many of our urban communities. And those are where those schools are
struggling.
Oof. Yeah. That's where those schools are struggling. That's where those students are struggling. Is that because the school is not providing what they need to provide? Or is it because the kids don't have the things that they need to even start their education each day? Have they been fed, talked to, sheltered, listened to? Right. Do they have their supplies? Did they get help with their homework? All of those factors that don't have anything to do with what the school is meant to do, which is to educate, right? So in so many of those schools, kids come to school and teachers and support staff have to overcome all of those barriers for those kids in order to even start talking about reading and math and science and so
Right.
on. And so I read an article recently that talked about when you take poverty, when you adjust for poverty, when you're talking about comparing schools across the globe, when you adjust for poverty and to such a level where the level of poverty in America is this, near or same as other countries, when you adjust for that,
Mm-hmm.
then the United States actually scores very, very well. And
Mm-hmm.
so my thought is it public schools are failing, or is it our social services are not meeting the needs of our families? It's frustrating to me that the responsibility comes back on schools for a lot of things that public schools don't have the authority or the ability to fix. And then we get into the idea of funding. We're into the issue of public school funding. The state of Texas spends a lot of money on public schools. Public schools, though, serve 5.5 million students each day of the school year. That costs money. I get that. And so, but with that said, public schools are funded like it's called the basic allotment. Public schools receive a basic allotment. That is your static funding that you can count on from year to year. And so districts are able to budget according to their basic allotment. Now they're going to get money from other sources. It's a little bit here and a little bit there, and it adds up. But that basic allotment is crucial so that districts can budget. In 2019, the basic allotment for districts was $6,150 per student in a district, right? 6,160. In 2025, before the legislative session, the basic allotment was $6,160. It had not moved in 6 years.
Wow.
6 years over the course of a pandemic and inflation that is out of control, right? So in the 25 legislative session, the 89th legislative session, the school experts, budget experts, money people were saying, in order just to meet the needs of school districts according to inflation, the basic allotment needs to be adjusted to about $1,300. We need to add $1,300 per student.
Wow.
The state legislature added $55. Right. So now we're talking about a funding issue that leaves districts short. And we've all heard about districts across the state, and they're having to close campuses, and they're having to do all of these things that are not in the best interest of communities, not in the best interest of students or staff. So districts across the state are having to close campuses and make decisions that aren't in the best interest of communities and students and families.
Right.
And what if and the mantra or the pushback on that is, well, these districts are mismanaging their money. Okay, if that was happening maybe a little bit here and a little bit there, I might accept that. But when it's happening across the state, absolutely not. That's not a district issue. That is a systems issue. That's a funding issue at the state level.
Yep.
And then when you think about the actual money that goes into a campus, or what a campus has availability to, and what they're able to spend that money on, if public schools, the state of Texas funding per student ranks 44th in the nation. 44th in the nation. We're not even average. Texas likes to talk about how we're number one and we're the best. Well, not in school funding. Right. So what if we ranked just in the very middle? Like we just had that much money per student that we could spend. What could school campuses spend that money on? We could make class sizes smaller. So instead of a 7th grade science class with 35 kids, 35 teenagers with one adult trying to control behavior, trying to get curriculum, trying to remediate, trying to enrich, trying to do labs, 35 kids. What if we could make that class 15 or 16 or 20 even? And then what would that teacher then be able to do for those students? What could the students do? There's much more opportunity for learning and experiences. I was an elementary school principal as well as middle school is my jam. I love middle school. I always say I did my time in elementary. Ooh, those little ones are a lot, but think about our kinder classrooms and our first grade classrooms where students are learning, 5 and 6 year olds are learning the foundations of reading and math,
Right.
two subjects that will serve them for the rest of their lives. They're sitting in classrooms of 22. That's our standard for Texas, 22 to one teacher. What if we kept it at 22, but we added an instructional assistant in there to help our small groups? You know, there are kids that come into kinder who cannot write their name on the paper, or I'm sorry, there are kids who come into kinder who are a little bit feral, who have not had any kind of social experiences, who don't know how to use their words to get what they want, to advocate for themselves. And there are kids that come into kinder who are already reading based on a lot about what they've experienced, you know, coming up to kinder, you know, in their first 5 years. And so to expect one adult to wrangle 22 kids and provide the foundations of math and reading is unreasonable. But if we had funding to make those class sizes smaller, to add instructional assistants, what tremendous impact would that have? Additional funding would also help with social emotional learning, which is really, really important. Those soft skills and learning how to collaborate and interact with other people. But who's supposed to do that? Because the kids who need that, they go to the counselor, who often is also responsible for administering the Section 504 program, making sure that all of those kids have their accommodations in their classrooms, or, you know, they're doing lessons in class. You know, it's a lot to educate kids. And so when I hear or read people say, well, you know, schools aren't trying hard enough, teachers aren't enough, they're just not capable, and, you know, or public schools are failing, my response to them is not to say you're wrong, but to say, please, I beg you, go and volunteer an hour in a public school. Go be a sub one day a month, and see what our teachers and our kids and our support staff are doing each and every day.
Yeah, I can imagine that would change their mind pretty quickly. What do you think public schools are doing especially well that doesn't get enough attention?
So things that public schools are doing that don't get a whole lot of recognition are the things that aren't measured by standardized testing. So things like conflict resolution, collaboration, your interpersonal skills, having a growth mindset, regulating your own emotions. Teachers work on that, support staff work on that with kids every single day because they have to, right? Kids sometimes don't get that modeling and that instruction at home. And so it's kind of left to schools. And I think schools do a tremendous job with that. Even though we hear a lot about discipline issues, I think on a day-to-day basis, kids are getting a lot of information and a lot of skills in that area.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Even something as simple as when someone says hello to you, or you're going to meet somebody, that you look them in the eye and that you shake their hand in a good firm handshake, and what do you say to them, and how do you carry on a conversation with someone you've just met, and, you know, those skills that are so important.
So one thing that surprised me in your questionnaire, and we're changing the subject again a little bit, but
Okay.
you describe yourself as a Democrat who is patriotic, pro Second Amendment, and fiscally conservative.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
So I participated in a group called Braver Angels, and their mission is to bring conservatives and liberals together to talk about really important, mostly hot topic issues. And so I went to several trainings. The first one I went to, they talked about what it means to be liberal, what it means to be conservative, the perceptions and the assumptions that we make about the so-called other side. Right. And so what I learned was, because I'm more liberal, conservatives tend to collectively make the assumption that I'm not patriotic, that I want to take everybody's guns away, that I don't like God, just all kinds of things. And I was stunned. And I thought, you're not talking about me, because none of those things are true. But Jeff, I have to be honest, it made me reflect and take a beat a little bit and say, well, then what perceptions and what assumptions am I making about the other side? And it was eye-opening to me. And I cannot say enough about that organization. Braver Angels is the name. So I participated in this. It was an in-person activity, I guess, where they brought conservatives and liberals together, and we paired up. So I'm more on the liberal side, so my partner was a conservative, and we had discussions one-on-one, and then we had discussions in groups that were both liberal and conservative. And we were talking about immigration, and that was hard. That is a emotionally charged topic. And in that, yes, and in that, you know, it was it was a little bit contentious in the beginning because we were all operating on those assumptions about the other person on both sides. And but as we started talking and really talking about the issue and not what we believe about our beliefs and other people's beliefs, we found as a group and as a partner group, we found that we believe a lot of the same things, that we want people to be safe from war in their countries, and we don't want people to suffer.
Right.
We want people to come who want to come to the US to do that in a legal way. We all want that. Anyway, it really opened my eyes. Dang it, what was the question? Oh, that okay. So in participating in Braver Angels, it just became much more clear about how I'm perceived, likely perceived by people in the conservative group. And so it's important to me that people know more about me, who I am and what I believe, because who you are is how you lead, right?
Right.
I believe in people. I believe people have to come first. I believe that the United States of America is the most amazing country ever. I am wholeheartedly patriotic in that if a flag passes by, I stand and put my hand over my heart. If I'm watching TV and I've got the nachos and the dogs, I mean, I'm watching a ball game and I've got the nachos and the dogs and we're all having a great time and they start to sing the national anthem, guess what? I move everything and I stand up because I believe that we owe that respect to our country, to the people who served so that we can have what we have. So very, very patriotic. Pro Second Amendment. I married into a hunting family. Hunting is really not my thing, but I appreciated that other people love to do that, and when they do it in humane ways, of course. But I wholeheartedly recognize that and honor that. I love to go. What's it called? You know, when you go. I love to go to the gun range and do target practice. It is so much fun. And being fiscally conservative, I believe that the government is. I believe the government has a responsibility to help people when they need it, so that they can be contributing members of society. That does not mean I believe in constant blank checks, that all of our money should be given to, all of the people, to do with what they want. I don't believe that, but I do believe the government should help. So there are so many nuances to our assumptions about other people and the assumptions made about me. And I just think it's important for people to know those things about me, because hopefully it gets us together at the same table where we can start having conversations.
Right. I strongly believe that all Americans have more in common than they think. And I hope that in this extreme divisiveness that we find ourselves in, we'll find our conscience again and realize that we're all Americans. And we may disagree on minor things, but we all agree on a lot of the foundational things that our country was founded upon. So hopefully we'll get back to that, and hopefully the polarization will stop and we can meet in the middle and start working together. That's my hope.
I agree. And I think that's possible if we are willing to do the work to get there.
Right. Yeah. You also wrote that if we don't find humanity in each other and disagree, our children could inherit the atrocities of a civil war. Now, that's a powerful statement. What inspired that statement?
Well, I think that when we allow ourselves as adults to model behavior like that we don't allow from kids, name calling, dehumanizing, those types of things, we are only sending the message to our children that that is appropriate. And we paint other people as evil, and that doesn't do anybody any good. And so I use the term civil war figuratively. I don't necessarily believe we'll face civil war in hand-to-hand combat, but I do believe that as a society, that if we are not willing to stop calling people names, saying outrageous things in social media or online or in public or to our children that dehumanizes other people, that makes them seem evil or less than, then our kids will grow up internalizing those beliefs and they will only become more concrete in our society. Because you wrote that about, that's a powerful statement. And I went back and read it and I was like, you know what that is? That's kind of a powerful statement. Yeah. If we don't start seeing ourselves as neighbors and fellow citizens and treating each other with dignity and with respect and value, because everybody, regardless of what your political leanings are or your religious beliefs or anything, we're all people, and we are, like you said, we're all in this together. No one's going to escape this life living, right? We're all here for a temporary time, and the best thing that we can do is to help our children see humanity and see the promise in other people and how we can work together. When I think about our teenagers, you think like a 15-year-old, let's say. So for the past 10 years or so, this is the only political climate they know.
Yeah.
And that is frightening to me.
It
So
is.
if we don't change course, that is going to become the norm. And I don't know that society will, I think it'll end up in long lasting trauma that it will take decades to.
Yeah. I agree 100%. It's so sad that you believe that people who disagree with you on certain subjects are the enemies of the state, enemies of our country. That's just amazing for me to believe. Even now, I mean, now there are some people that I disagree with very much,
Mhm.
but do I consider them enemies? No, not at all. My neighbors, most of my neighbors don't have the same beliefs I do. They don't have the same political thoughts that I do. But when one of them gets sick or if something happens to my family, they're the first ones over to my house, you
Yeah.
know, bringing food over. My wife, she loves to cook, so she feeds the neighborhood sometimes. We don't decide who we're going to give food to based on their
Yeah.
political beliefs. We need to get back to that. I'm not saying I'm an expert or I'm a perfect example, but we need to get back to that. We're Americans first. You come from the same generation and the same period that I do, where you really didn't know what somebody's politics were. Anything you talk about turns into a political discussion, and yeah, it drives me crazy.
It does. And interestingly, I don't think I mentioned this before. I was raised actually in a conservative household, and I voted Republican through George W. I think was the last,
Yeah,
so really just 20 years ago. And it
yeah,
was only after teaching, being in the classroom and seeing so many different families and kids and different ways of believing and of doing things that I realized not everybody is just like me. And
exactly.
it was at that point that I was like, I think I need to, I think my values more closely align with more of a liberal
Hmm.
identity,
Right.
because I just think that it doesn't matter. It does not matter how much money you make or what you look like or what you believe politically or who you love or any of those things that, like you're saying, we are all in this together. We're neighbors, we're fellow citizens, we're Americans, and we have to work together to make it a great place to be.
Right. I agree. So, what's the one thing people often misunderstand about you?
I think that when people first meet me, that sometimes they might confuse my generally positive, good natured demeanor to mean that I'm not willing or capable to make really hard decisions or to have tough conversations. And that could not be farther from the truth. As I tend to approach things with a sense of curiosity, not judgment. But once we get into a conversation, if I need to make the hard decision or if I need to say something to further that conversation, I am more than willing to do that.
That's a good skill to have in politics. So, outside of politics,
Yeah.
what brings you the most joy?
My favorite things to do are that settle me, that ground me. I love to spend time with friends and family, particularly playing card games.
Oh,
Love that. I love live music, live sporting events. My other passion, interesting, just dogs. I love dogs. I have a shirt that says, "Sorry, I'm late. I saw a dog." Like that is the epitome of me. Dogs are my favorite people, and I love them.
wow. Well, you and my wife would get along. Well, I'd get along
Mhm.
with you well too because we love dogs as well. We
Uh-huh.
At one time we had 8 dogs in the household.
Oh
Now
goodness.
some of them have passed on, of course. But
Yeah.
yeah, right now we have four. We've got four dogs.
Yeah. Even that's a lot.
Yeah, and three cats indoors, and then I can't even count the number of cats that hang around the house. We've just
Yeah. I would love to come hang out at your house.
yes. I mean, my wife works for a dog rescue. She volunteers with a dog rescue. So yeah,
That may be why y'all at one point had 8 dogs.
yes, of
I
course.
would love. I volunteer a lot, but that is one place I can't volunteer. I know because I will bring them home. Or my heart will hurt all the time, and I just can't do it.
Well, two of the four that we have are rescues that were foster fails. We ended up taking, but okay. Well, we're getting close to the end here. But what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is I like to do a rapid fire round with everybody. So the first one is coffee or tea.
Definitely tea, sweet tea, real Southern sweet tea.
Oh yeah, you're a Southern girl.
I
Okay. How about your favorite restaurant around Canyon Lake or New Braunfels?
Oh my gosh, there's so many to choose from, but I'm going to go with Pat's Place here in New Braunfels. It is just old school, a little bit of everything. They have great cheese enchiladas and a burger and a crispy fried chicken sandwich. So
Pat's
Pat's
Place.
Place.
I'm gonna have to put that on our list. My wife and I, we like to go out to eat at least once a week.
Yeah.
We like to have date night.
Uh-huh.
So Pat's Place. One of our favorite places is Clear Springs.
Oh, I love Clear Springs.
Man,
Yep.
that's our favorite place.
Yeah.
So, what's your favorite place to relax in the whole country?
That is 100% on my kayak in the Guadalupe River.
Wow. Okay.
It is,
So you
oh
like
my gosh. Yeah, it's one of the few places where I can let everything just go and just be. It's quite amazing.
so do you go in the New Braunfels area or?
I typically stay in the New Braunfels area. The Guadalupe has more entry points, and so we go there. But I also love kayaking on the Comal.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sunrise or sunset?
Definitely sunrise. I love the sunrise because there's hope for the day.
Awesome. Good answer. Favorite Texas tradition?
Uh, I think, I think just the greeting, "Hey y'all." I typically start every conversation with that.
What's one word that describes Canyon Lake to you?
Ooh, in my years of being in and around the lake, I'd say comfortable. It's just always been really comfortable to me.
Yeah. We were talking beforehand. We lived in the San Antonio area for about 5 years before we moved to Canyon Lake. We've been here about 4 years now, and we really love San Antonio, but we started coming to Canyon Lake on the weekends, just
Hmm.
hanging out and enjoying the lake. And, we decided that we were going to retire here. So that's what we've
Yep,
done. So we retired here. We love it.
that's great.
What's one thing every newcomer should experience after moving here?
There are lots of things to choose from. What came immediately to mind, though, for me was I think people should walk the top of the dam all the way across and back.
True.
And I think they should go walk the gorge. I think both of those places just give you a sense of what Canyon Lake is.
Yeah. We haven't been to the gorge
Gorge.
yet. Yeah. We've been to the dam. We've walked the dam, but we haven't been to the gorge. We're going to have to go to that.
Yeah.
Drive by it all the time.
The gorge is so interesting to me because when I was growing up here, it didn't exist. And
Right.
then the water came over the spillway, I can't 2000, I can't remember the exact year, and then created the gorge. And we know that like the Grand Canyon is created from water coming through there, but to experience that, to see it happen was tremendous.
Yeah. Yeah. I drive by it all the time. We just haven't stopped.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay, so to wrap up, let's see. District 73 has
Yep.
consistently elected Republicans. As a Democrat, what do you hope Republican and independent voters will learn about you that they might not expect?
I want people to know that I work hard and that I believe strongly in personal responsibility, that I believe a person's character is more about what they do than what they say, and that I want the same things for their families that I want for my family. And that is clean water, good schools, and open land.
Well said. And where can people learn more about your campaign and follow your work?
Sure. I have a campaign website. It is foxfortexas.com. And then my socials, basically Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, it's Fox for Texas.
Okay. I'm going to have to follow you on those.
Yeah, I will say I love all of the short version videos. I love TikTok. And at the same time, being on the other side of it and trying to create content. Wow. I don't like being on the camera, and I don't feel creative enough to be engaging, but I have a newfound respect for content creators. They make it look so easy, and I don't find that to be the case.
Yeah, I need to do a better job of that myself for my podcast.
I think you're doing great. Yeah. How did you decide to do a podcast that where you can see it instead of just listening?
Well, I've watched podcasts for probably 10 years, and I just think podcasts are probably more engaging when you can see it instead of
Yep,
listening on the radio. When you can see the people that you're talking to and you can see the people that are responding. That's the whole thing.
I agree.
Yeah, I'd rather be on camera at least. I'm hoping one day that I might be able to set up a studio where I can do face to face. But for right now, we're doing it remotely. But
Yep.
yeah, I would eventually like to do that.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Can I ask you one question?
Sure.
Just your opinion about something, talking about how it's more compelling to see the humans that are talking to each other than
Hmm.
rather than just listening. So I had someone ask me just the other day, am I gonna put my face on my campaign signs that can start going up in August? And I said, no, I just ordered a set. No, I don't have my face on them. And they were like, why not? I've struggled with that decision a lot because I think human faces are compelling. They draw your attention. But
Yeah.
I've gotten advice about no, you should never put your face on a campaign sign. So do you have an opinion about that?
I think it's attention grabbing. I think people will recognize you. Maybe they don't recognize you when you're out in the Braunfels. They probably don't recognize you much unless they know you.
Right.
And maybe if you put your face on some of your advertisements, maybe people will start putting a name to a face. That's just
I,
my opinion. I don't know.
yeah. Well, it's appreciated. I've already ordered my first set. Those will go up in August, but I'll do a second set to change them out in October, just to because people stop seeing them after a while, even
Right.
when they pass them. So I'll do a new one, and maybe I'll put my face on that one.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I actually have two podcasts that I do. This one is focused on Canyon Lake, of course, and then I have another one that's called Unfiltered with Jeff, where I talk to people from around the world. And I do have my face on that logo, but I don't have my face on the Canyon Lake Unfiltered logo. So
That is
maybe I will.
interesting.
Maybe I'll change my logo and put my face on it. Well, Merrie, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today and for sharing your story, your experiences, and your vision for District 73. And thank you to everyone listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, follow, and share it with your friends and neighbors. These conversations help all of us become more informed about the people and the issues shaping our community. Until next time, this is Jeff with Canyon Lake Unfiltered. Keep asking questions, keep listening, and keep getting involved in your community.
Yep.
So thank you again, Merrie,
Thank you, Jeff. It's been a pleasure.
and maybe we'll bring you back again. I hope to.
Okay. I I would love that anytime.
Okay. Well, maybe right before the election, we'll have you on. You
That'd
know,
be awesome.
yeah, it would be great. So thank you again.
All right. Thank you for your patience and understanding. I'm sure the problems were mine, but now I have figured it out. So next time, not an issue.
No problem.
All
Thanks,
right.
well.
Thanks, Jeff. Y'all have a great day.
You too.